Uh, Hello, ma'am. You're there?
Yeah, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
Right? Clear audio and video?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you as well.
Right. So this is more of a webinar, is it?
Yeah, it is more of a webinar, and some participants are joining. We
Right,
probably we can interact with them, and participants will reply over chat as of now.
right. So we do have a minute.
Yeah, we have a minute. We can call it. Let me introduce myself. I'm Sunil Sharma. I'm the Vice President for Aditya Birla Education Academy. While is taking care of other sessions of USF, this session I'll be taking care of it. Along with me, Royston has also joined. Okay,
Right,
and hopefully participants are joining, and we'll take it ahead in next 2-3 minutes.
right.
Yeah. Pooja ma'am, I think we can start. Participants will join, and the lecture is already recorded on YouTube. If any case they miss out, it'll be there on YouTube.
Sure. So just give me 30 seconds. I'll just set my presentation. Yeah. All right.
Dr. Sheila wants to speak. Yeah, Dr. Sheila.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Sheila.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
are-
Okay. I'm afraid you are not able to see me. I have no idea why. See me. I have no idea why. See me.
I think you're logged in two devices probably. Hence, there's an echo.
Right now, I'm operating from one device.
Yes, yes. Now it is clearly audible.
Okay. Never mind. Dr. Pooja, are you ready?
Dr. Pooja, you have option to share your PPT?
1 second. Yes.
Yeah, she has. And I guess Dr. Sheila just dropped off from the call.
Okay, okay. Probably network issue. She wanted to introduce, I guess, Dr. Pooja, right?
Yeah, she is rejoining. Okay, she is now able to speak, Dr. Sheila.
Yeah. Once
Uh,
Dr. Sheila is done, you have
I'm
to
here. I'm here. So
hear
I'm
you.
so sorry about this. There's some network issue. So is Dr. Pooja ready?
Yes, yes, Dr. Pooja is ready.
Okay, doctor. So I'll just be starting. Your teachers, welcome to the session, the first one of its kind, powered by the Unaided Schools Forum. We have Mr. S.C. Kedia and his resourceful team to thank for this session. Today's session is on understanding the competency framework of curriculum planning and will be conducted by Dr. Pooja Benjamin, and she is here as a facilitator through the Aditya Birla Education Academy. Thanks to ABEA for that. To introduce you to Dr. Pooja, she's a passionate educator and enthusiastic public speaker and avid traveler, a movie buff. The list is endless. Dr. Pooja.
I guess she has dropped off the call again.
and she's back again. I guess she is having a little network issue on her side.
So, Dr. Sheila, you're not audible. Uh,
Not audible.
Now
I'm
you're audible.
trying to, I have to literally now go out of the window. There's something seriously wrong. I'll just keep it short. Dr. Benjamin has been conducting online sessions and master classes for students and teachers alike. And she has been associated with Center for Active Teaching Learning Strategies for English Classroom, Conflict Management, Problem Solving Skills, and the list is exhaustive. I'll not waste much time. Dr. Pooja, I request you to take center stage and start the session. Thank you.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, thank you for cutting that short because I also don't appreciate with an exhaustive list. So just quick check, Royston, if I'm audible and clearly visible.
Yes, yes, you are
You're
audible.
Great.
audible.
So,
Yeah.
and I'll be able to see the chat. I'll also keep on opening the question answer sessions by side. But in case if I miss out on something really important, I would like to be notified so that nobody goes unheard. So today's session is going to be about competency-based learning, that is competency-based education and competency-based work. Presentation with you all.
Yes, it's
What's
visible.
before I continue with what is competency-based education, I'd like to talk about a little bit about what is the difference between traditional education and competency-based education, and why is competency and skill framework so much in vogue right now and so much in conversation right now. So you can keep on posting your comments and responses in the chat box. I'm all eyes and ears here and there, multitasking at the same time. So when we talk about the 20th century education, we obviously know that what kind of an education it was, and most importantly, with digital literacy, media literacy, and technology boom, the 20th century education, so to say, was a more traditional education format, wherein it was the teacher who was at the center stage, and the teacher was, and it was all the chalk and talk concept. But as and when and as and why we started moving from that concept into the 21st century skill and 21st century teaching learning, we're talking about not just technology, we're talking about skills, we're talking about competencies, we're talking about character, we're talking about leadership, and holistically, we're talking about 21st century skills in teaching and learning in education. And to say that school is only responsible for inculcating and instilling 21st century skills amongst children would not be right, because these are those skills, this is that framework, it is that kind of an education that is a holistic in nature, that can happen anywhere, anytime, because it is all got to do with experiential learning, it has got to do a lot with project-based learning, it has got a lot to do with cross-curricular focus, it has got a lot to do with value-based learning, with character-based learning and character development. So competency-based learning and competency framework, to say so, has a holistic 360-degree approach, not dependent on any one person, because there are a lot of connections to make, there are a lot of relations to create, there is a lot of bonding that has to be done. And overall, like I said, it is a holistic 360-degree approach. So to continue with what it is, let's quickly look at something that I have prepared for all of you. And like I said, you can post it in the chat box. So if I have to ask you people, what is the one thing that you're unbeatable at? Anybody? I mean, I don't think if you can speak, but if you can just write, Royston, they can write in the chat box, right?
Ma'am, they have disabled the chat box. I'm afraid they can't.
So then how will I interact with them? So
Roy,
right.
you can enable the chat for the panelist.
Yeah, they should be able to message, but I will just check once again.
Yeah, so participants, I mean, the question answer box is open in front of me. So if you could just write
Yes, now they
some
can
of,
chat. Okay.
they can put their comments in the chat.
Yes.
Right, great. So right. So if anybody wishes to answer, anybody wishes to reply, because this is something that kickstarts any ice-breaking activity. So you could read any one thing. For example, if you had one superpower, what would it be? How would you use it? Right? If you have to travel time, if you have to get into one historical period, which one would you go to? If you were a cocktail or a mocktail, which one would you be? If you had to sing a karaoke right now, which song would you pick? Right? So you can feel free to answer any of these questions. If you could become a supernatural creature at night, what would it be and what would you do? If you could pick up any skill instantly and right now, which one would it be? Right? So we are talking about, I don't remember when I was a student, I don't remember going through so many creative activities as a student, and look back at your own educational times when we were children, all of us, how we would be taught. So John Dewey said, and so did Rabindranath Tagore, said that if we teach our children the way we were taught yesterday, then we will definitely rob them of tomorrow. Right? So our children, though, are ours, but there is to be a lot of creativity. There is to be a lot of innovativeness. There has to be a lot of communication, collaboration into learning and teaching. And that is where competency-based learning and teaching and competency-based framework comes into picture. So to kickstart, I mean, I just put through these some prompters for you to creatively think and for a moment to apply your own competencies, your own imagination, your own creativity, your own skill, and answer and think. So this has got nothing to do with reflection or a right or a wrong answer or any judgmental opinion. So if I have to become a supernatural creature at night, I don't know. I mean, it might sound a little weird, but I would love to become a vampire or a Dracula. I would like to see how I look if I become a vampire with two teeth dropping out. Or if I have to have a superpower, what would it be? And I would love to teleport myself. I would love to travel the world. So for that, I would love to have an anywhere door or a teletransportation or a teleportation power, right? So if I have to, if I'm feeling stressed, how would I deal with it, for example? So I would love to watch a movie or listen to some music. So these are some things, these are some prompters that would give children or anybody for that matter, a kick thought away from the textbook, but somehow connected somewhere or the other to learning process, to their values, to their own thinking process, to their own creativity, to their own imagination, right? So yeah, somebody would like to start baking, somebody would like to watch Harry Potter, somebody would like to remove poverty from the world, somebody would like to be alone if they're stressed so that they don't lash out on anyone. So here you go, and I'm reading as much as I can. So let's understand what are the session objectives of this session. What are the objectives, learning objectives of this session? Because learning objectives has a lot to do with competency-based curriculum and framework, right? So we are going to obviously talk about what is competency-based education. We are going to discuss a little about traditional education and competency-based education in terms of compare and contrast. We will identify key features and principles of competency-based framework. And then let's see how we can do a little bit of assessment, feedback, and a plenary reflection in terms of competency framework, right? You can also keep posting questions if you have any. So there are two pictures, there are two images. I'm sure the differences are stark. They are clear, evident, and as evident as they can be. But just to get a quick idea and a little idea, what are some of the differences that you can see in the two pictures? So you can just quickly post it. They're very clear, evident. So what image does the first picture evoke and what image does the second picture evoke? So teacher-centric, involvement of the teacher, right? In the second one, it's a playway method, right? Student learning, right? Absolutely. Anything else that comes to the mind when you see these two pictures? One-to-one teaching, learning by doing, right? Chalk and talk and playway method, interactive method, enjoyable. Second pick, children are enjoying that. And why are they enjoying? Why do you think that children in the second pick are enjoying more than the ones in the first pick? What do you think would be one of the core reasons, prime reasons for the enjoyable session in the second picture maybe? Positive class environment, playway method, methods of teaching are different, more involved, individual attention, interaction. So there is interaction, there is fun in learning, there is engagement, there is involvement. So all of these things, see, conducive and positive learning environment can be there in the first picture also. The teacher over here is not a dictator, she's not a Hitler, or she's not a Dracula or a witch that there'll be no happiness around, right? However, why we say and why most of us or all of us feel that the second picture or the second image has more fun, is more enjoyable, is more pleasurable, because there is interaction, because there is engagement, because there is teacher involvement, and even more importantly, the first picture is teacher-centric, while the second picture is student-centric. And that is the main paradigm shift that we are talking about. We are talking about a huge, huge paradigm shift. We are talking about a paradigm shift from a teacher-centric classroom or learning environment to a student-centric classroom or learning environment. We're talking about a paradigm shift of the teacher, rather than being the sage on the stage, to becoming the side by the guide. So that is the kind of a paradigm shift we are talking about, right? So this is absolutely clear, because we're talking about togetherness, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about even personalized attention. And that is the shift, like I said, we are talking about. So I have a little connector activity for all of you. So when we are talking about competency framework, right? Again, you can post it in the chat box for all of us to read and see. I want you to kind of, if you have a paper and a pen, to jot down what is it that you already know? What is it that you want to know? How will you find out what you want to know? And at the end, when we come back to the end, when we come to the end of the session, we will discuss what have you learned, right? So what about competency-based education? What about competency framework is it that you already know? What about competency framework and learning education is that you want to know a little more? And how will you find out? So this is called the KWHL chart. So I think I'll give you, say, about maybe a minute. So maybe a minute to jot down your thoughts, either in the chat box or a piece of paper, and then you can put it here. So to begin with the first column, what do you already know about competency-based education or competency learning framework? What, according to you, is competency? Anybody? So are we using participants? Focused on overall learning, is holistic in nature, right? Learning by doing, yes, is your understanding of competency. All right. What else? Anybody? Skill-based learning. So what is skill-based learning? The art of teaching, experiential learning, flexible, right? Experiential learning, developing skill learning, completing in real world, assessment of learning, learning through activities, learning by doing, is skill-based learning important, that is required for a job? Yes. Experimental and experiential learning? Yes. Right. Let's move to the second column. What is it that you want to know a little more about competency-based learning? So is there anything that you think you need to know more about competency-based learning? Do you still have any doubts? How effective is it? How to bring it to classrooms? That's a huge, huge question that everybody asks. How effective is competency-based learning, and how can we bring it to classrooms? Yes. Anybody else wants to, what do you want to know about competency-based education? How can we implement it in day-to-day teaching learning process? How to incorporate it? How to execute it? How to make practical learning more interesting? How can we use different activities in the class to develop learning? How to implement it, how to inculcate the learnings with the children, how to incorporate learning objectives and learning outcomes. These are absolutely relevant execution. These are absolutely relevant questions and relevant things, right? So next, how will you find out what you want to know? How will you find out? Execution of these practices. How do students typically respond to competency-based education? Through webinars, interactive sessions. Yes. Ask someone who's already doing it, research, experimentation, taking feedback from students, asking questions. Yes, but taking feedback, all of that, absolutely bang on. So last column we will leave for right now, because last column we will come exploring through activities, taking feedback, conducting activities, regular observations, exploring, exploiting technology. Yes, learning by doing it, all of that is bang on correct, right? We will skip the last column for now and we will move on, because this last column we can come back to once we are done with the session. Group discussions, sharing, demonstration, absolutely. So this is how you will find out what you want to know, bang on. And that is why this session, this webinar or this session today, online session, where we are going to discuss and talk about competency-based framework, right? So let's have a quick look at what is traditional education and what is competency-based education, and how do the two look like. So when we talk about traditional education, we talk about time-based model. When we talk about competency, CBE is what we call, we talk about mastery-based model. When we talk about traditional education, we talk about instructor-centered approach. Over here, this is student-centered approach. Here, there is a fixed curriculum, rigid, strategized, but rigid. In CBE, the curriculum can be customized. It can be tweaked. And yes, apart from the board classes, classes 9, especially 10 and 12, and largely 9 to 12, up and until 8, because when we talk about developing skills, when we talk about competencies, inculcating competencies and skills, we talk about how we can train our children and how we can inculcate skills in our children surely up to the middle school, that is up to grade 8. So when we talk about skills and competencies, up and until grade 8, we can inculcate skills in the children. And then onwards, they are obviously preparing for their colleges and their board exams and their career choices, universities, and all of that, right? So competency CBE talks about a customizable, tweakable, a more student-friendly curriculum, lesson planning with objectives and outcomes. This progress is based on time and courses, while this is based on small assessments, timely assessments, regular assessments, formative assessments, the learning intention, the learning outcome, and then whatever the gap in between the learning intention and outcome is, to build that, to bridge that learning gap. That is the mastery, that is the progress that is made to be made on the competency-based learning. Then this is more about credits and grades. This is more about demonstration of skills and competencies through formative assessments, through internal assessments, through communication skills, through critical thinking skills and analytical thinking skills and problem solving skills. So all of that will come into the CBE framework. Then we are talking about assessments. In traditional mode of education, which is followed even now, the standardized assessments, that is what we call is summative assessment, that happens towards the end of each term, towards the end of different schools do it differently, unit tests and then short-term tests, and then definitely every school has a long-term assessment, which is called the summative assessment, which is maybe twice a year, half-yearly exams and final exams, or thrice a year, depending on each school's requirement and necessity. But when we talk about CBE, we talk about performance-based assessments. We talk about to build the learning gap. We talk about formative assessments, short-term capsuled assessments to understand whether the concept is clear to the children or not, or to a particular child or not. So for that, regular classroom assessments, regular formative assessments, followed by a consistent, persistent, regular feedback is extremely important. This is more about degree-focused education, that is grades and degrees. This is more about skills and competency. And skills, when we talk about, we're talking about 21st century skills, and we will have a clear look at it. This is about fixed costs. This is about variable costs, rigid schedule, and obviously a flexible schedule. So earlier it used to be that whatever timeline, whatever time frame has been given, we have to complete the syllabus in that time frame. We have to complete and interact in that particular given time. But now, thanks to technology, COVID launched so many online platforms that now the learner and the teacher, the facilitator and the learner can meet online also on so many platforms. So there is always a flexible schedule. There is nothing rigid or stubborn about it, right? So we can interact on a personalized, on a one-to-one, on a personal, at a personal level at different modes, right? Through different modes. It could be online, offline, one-to-one, group, peer, whichever way the learner and the facilitator are comfortable with. So this was a huge discussion about traditional education and the CBE, that is the competency-based education, right? Now let's look at what CBE more clearly looks like. So we are talking about clear learning objectives and clear learning outcomes to be embedded in the lesson plan. So I'm not too sure, again, different schools, different organizations, and how do they function. So, but when we are talking about transactioning a particular topic or anything, when we're talking about conveying and transactioning a topic or a chapter or any concept, we design a lesson plan. The lesson plan can be on a daily basis. The lesson plan can be on a weekly basis, a comprehensive unit-wise lesson plan, depending upon how your school instructs you to do it. So the lesson plan should clearly, a competency-based lesson plan should be very clearly outlined, clearly strategized with learning objectives or intentions, with the success criteria, resources used, formative assessment, strategies and activities, teacher input, student response, reflection, and a connector and a plenary, and absolutely clear learning outcomes. So this is what I want to convey today through this session. And by the end of the session, this is what I want my learners or my participants to have produced. So I have set a clear learning objective for today's session, which is to say that we're going to talk about CBE. We're going to compare and contrast traditional and CBE mode of communication and education. We are going to talk about certain strategies and activities. We're going to talk about the common problems that everybody faces. We're going to talk about experiential learning, personalized learning, project-based learning, active teaching learning, flipped classroom, student-centric classroom, cross-curricular focus, connections, all of that we are going to talk about. Assessments, feedback. So all of that we will talk about. So this was my objective. Now, outcome, by the end of the session, this is what I want my learners to have attained. And not just to have attained, but through some sort of an activity or some sort of a worksheet or some sort of an interaction, they will have produced it also in the desired manner, up to my expectation. So I have a learning objective. I have a learning outcome through some activities and reflection and feedback. And if the two of them are met closely together, the purpose is achieved. But if the two of them are far and distant, the learning objective and the learning outcome, then there is a huge learning gap that needs to be filled. So it is of crucial importance that clear learning objectives and outcomes are to be designed, are to be delineated, and to be put into the lesson plan, if it is a CBE-based lesson plan. Differentiated and timely support. So we all know it, we know it very clearly as educators, as teachers, that every classroom has a mixed learner ability. So I'm sure no classroom will have children who are like 100%ers. No classroom will have children who will be absolutely below average. So every classroom will have learners with mixed abilities, right? So what our job, our role as facilitators is to provide differentiated and timely intervention. And that can only happen when we have clear learning objectives and clear learning outcomes, and we identify the learning gaps, and we identify that, yes, there is a problem here. Yes, there is an issue with this child. This is the skill the child is lacking in. It could be reading, it could be memory, it could be writing, it could be vocabulary, or even basic comprehension that the child could be lacking in. So once we've identified that kind of a skill or that kind of a learning gap, then how to manage it and how to provide differentiated and timely support to the learner becomes a part of the CBE. That is a framework, competency-based framework. Assessments. So summative assessments, the entire school does. It is mandatory. Even the board exams conduct full-length exams and summative assessments. But what becomes crucial on our part is to conduct those short scales tests, regular class tests. And they not necessarily have to be 20 marks or 25 marks. They could be, you've taught half a chapter in 3 days and you want to understand whether your learners have been able to make something of it or not, whether your learners have been able to understand or not, to be able to gauge that learning gap among your learners. Formative assessments, meaningful, positive assessments are important. So that is one part of the competency-based education. Personalized learning is very, very important. So like I said, that there is always mixed ability. There is always different learning abilities among children. Now, there could be a possibility that there is a particular learner, there is a particular child who doesn't understand well in a group of children. Inclusive education, we talk a lot about inclusive education, but inclusive education still is a huge and far-fetched dream. Right? So, but through personalized and one-to-one assessment and one-to-one learning or personalized attention, a lot of learning gaps can be identified and can be resolved through activities, through different ways and different strategies of learning, right? And then when the children, and then when as learners and facilitators, when they have been able to come this way, then we can master upon the explicit competencies. Then we can go around talking about bigger competencies and skills and real life skills and worldwide skills and all of that. Right? So I will move a little ahead quickly and let us understand how competency-based framework looks like. Once again, in terms of what is the need? Why competency-based framework, right? So when we talk about competency-based framework and skill-based framework, we are not only looking at board exams. We are definitely looking at board exams, but that is not the only prime and sole agenda. We are looking at career choices. We are looking at colleges. We are looking at personality growth and development. We are looking at a holistic approach. And we are looking at real world job skills that each learner should be able to fetch for themselves, that each learner should be able to get a job for themselves or create a job for themselves and others. We're talking about personalized learning. We're talking about cost effective. We're talking about compliance. We're talking about student success. We're talking about a customized curriculum, and we're talking about critical thinking, analytical thinking, and problem-solving skills. So this is a quick glance at and a quick overview of what competency-based learning looks like. If there is anything so far and so now that anybody wants to, the chat box can go rolling once again. If anybody wants to put in something, please feel free and you're welcome. I know it might get a little dull and boring in between and at times, but when we are talking about competency-based learning and when we are talking about competency-based framework, there is no way that we can not talk about 21st century skills. And 21st century skills meaning 21st century life skills. So we are hugely talking about competency-based learning, competency-based framework, and we are talking about 21st century skills. So I think I have a very important question. How do we manage different learners in the classroom? I know it is very difficult. I mean, as a novice, as an amateur, about 17 years ago, when I just started teaching primary sections for fun sake and for pocket money, I had absolutely no clue how to handle children. Forget about competencies and skills and 21st century skills. Those were beyond the purview of my thought process. But leave alone that, I didn't even know how to handle children. Children with same abilities, children with different abilities. So all of this is a part of the classroom management, classroom discipline. So we need to find ways through activities, through engagement, through discussions, through conversations, wherein there is something for every child and there is no child left behind. Every child needs to have something. Even when we are designing our question papers, sometimes we get really stuck because we constantly keep on thinking question paper is बहुत easy तो नहीं है, question paper बहुत difficult तो नहीं है, and our entire thought process goes into that only. We forget that there are differently abled children in our class in terms of different learning skills, different potentials, different competencies, different abilities. Somebody is going to be super smart, somebody is going to be extremely vocal in their oral responses, but when it comes to writing skills, they fall flat. Somebody could be extremely well in writing, but when it comes to oral skills, they could be flat. Somebody could learn up very easily. Rote learning and memorization is good with them, but when it comes to creative thinking, they lose their battle. So we know that all sorts of children in today's time and age, all sorts of children, what we have to do is, and that is where lesson planning, active teaching learning strategies, and assessment play an important role. Because if our lessons are designed well and properly, if our strategies are in place, and if our assessments are factored into our lessons and transactions, we will definitely be able to manage the entire classroom, and we will be able to cater to different children with different abilities and learning skills. However, coming to 21st century skills, we know they are very important. We talk about creativity. We know that creativity brings with it a lot of imagination, a lot of innovation, a lot of visualization, a lot of ideation, curiosity, and a lot of problem-solving skills. When we talk about collaboration, collaboration needs a lot of teamwork, patience, communication, inclusivity, cross-cultural conversations and interaction. We're talking about 21st century. As a teacher, I have observed in my class, and not just classes. When I enter the class, I'm talking about small children particularly, how biased they are, how opinionated they can be at times, how prejudiced they can be, how gender biased, social biased they could be. And it's not their fault, because they are probably been brought up in that scenario, in that way, in that manner. So when I enter some of my classes, I see boys swept to one side and girls all swept to one side. That is the gender divide we are talking about in today's time and age. 21st century children, we are talking about boys at one side and girls all at one side. So I have to make an effort. The first 5 minutes of my class always goes in regrouping the children for an inclusive and a gender unbiased education, so that they know that they're all classmates, they know that they're all batchmates, they know that they're all friends. They don't need to be best friends with everybody, but at least a social acceptance and inclusivity, a cross-cultural conversation, trying to understand each other's personality, trying to be able to accept, adapt, and include each and every one into their design of framework. So that is extremely important. When we talk about social and civic engagement, we are talking about global citizenship. We are talking about sustainability. the 17 SDG goals that we have. We're talking about health and wellness. And when we're talking about health and wellness, we're talking about physical health, we're talking about emotional health, we're talking about emotional well-being, we're talking about mental well-being and perspectives on those. And we're talking about gender equity, gender inclusivity, like the example I gave you just now. We're talking about emotional awareness, because emotional awareness and leadership qualities are hugely interlinked. So emotional awareness brings with it acceptance, resilience, self-awareness, adaptability, empathy. All of this comes with so all of this comes with regionalism is very much there. Absolutely, regionalism is there. So there is regionalism in the sense that that is what it causes: a cultural divide, social divides, and economic divides, linguistic divides. And when we're talking about India, such a huge and diverse country, we're talking about all sorts of divisions. We're talking about all sorts of exclusions. We're talking about all sorts of prejudices and biases. We're talking about such a vast country and a diverse country, which will take, I don't know, we don't know what an era or how many ages and how many years probably to make it into a hugely inclusive place. But what we can start off with, of course, we can start with ourselves, our own classrooms, our own space, our own area. We can start off with to overcome linguistic barriers, to overcome gender biases, to overcome stereotypes and orthodox beliefs, to overcome anything that can hamper the creativity, innovativeness, and any sort of cognitive development of the child or the learner. So what we can do as educators, facilitators, and adults is very, very important that we inculcate and encourage a lot of gender mixing, a lot of peer grouping, a lot of regrouping and reshuffling, a lot of peer tutoring, a peer mentoring, and a peer assessment and a peer help. So all of this is most certainly going to build on, enhance gender equity, gender inclusivity, and will get rid of a lot of biases and prejudices. Bring in a little more self-awareness, a little more empathy. One second, please. Right, so so a lot of it can be reduced by a lot of it can be reduced when we do a lot of acceptance, lot of tolerance, lot of inclusivity, and a lot of connections with the children. When we talk about cognitive, which is an important aspect of the 21st century skills, again, we're talking about thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, lateral thinking, and problem solving skills in cognition and cognitive ability. We're talking about leadership. So when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about strategizing, we're talking about organizing, we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about excellence, we're talking about influencing without commanding, demanding without commanding, influencing without authority. We're talking about a lot of connection, and leadership also has a lot of empathy in it, right? So all of this is that web, is that tree that makes up the 21st century skills framework and is extremely important in terms of competency-based education and skill framework, right? So when we're talking about, I think we've discussed enough, defined and described competency-based learning so much that by now we understand that it is an entire approach, an entire paradigm shift towards teaching, learning, and assessment and feedback. It focuses on student demonstration of learning outcomes. It focuses on attaining proficiencies in competencies and skills. It places the learner at the center, no child left behind, and every child is important. Active engagement, active involvement of the learner, student-centric. We talk about real life and real world applications of knowledge and skills. and we talk about the authenticity of the learning experience so that we can build the gap, bridge the gap between learning intention and learning outcome, right? So these are, again, just a repetition, a reiteration of what it is, and I'll move forward. Now let's look at the key features of CBE. That is, how does CBE function and how to make CBE function effectively, efficiently, and proficiently? What should we be doing as educators and facilitators? So we need to enhance and build an equitable and learner-centric framework. Differentiated support and personalized attention, one-to-one attention is extremely important. Use of formative assessments, outcome-based objectives, and consistent, timely, positive, constructive feedback has to be given. These are some of the key features of CBE. Now, there are three pillars. Three, I would rather say fourth. I think I've missed out fourth, but I've been talking about it. How do we design our curriculum? That is a lesson plan, activities, objectives, intentions, outcomes, strategies, adjectives, connectors, plenaries, assessment, homework. How do we design our curriculum throughout? What does the teaching and learning through that curriculum look like? Is it active-based? Is it project-based? Is it cross-curricular focus? Is it experiential learning? So what is the teaching and learning going to look like based on this design? And how are we going to gauge this teaching and learning has been efficient and effective? Is going to be through assessments, formative and summative alike. Also, following the formative assessments is going to be a consistent, persistent, timely, and constructive feedback. Because what is an assessment if there is no feedback to it, right? So the chat box has gone a little lull for a while, I think. Let's keep it rolling and let's see if anybody has anything to say, ask, or contribute. So now let us look at what does curriculum design mean, right? So curriculum design means how we are going to design our year-long curriculum framework, divide it and segregate into semesters or months. What is the objective behind each curriculum that we are designing, and how far are we going to take it? And what is the outcome going to be? So based on all of that, we are going to talk about curriculum design, where we are going to bring in real world contexts, relevance to daily life, skill development, hands-on experience. Higher order thinking skills have to be integrated and incorporated. Interdisciplinary or cross-curricular approach or focus has to be incorporated, or initiative. Problem-solving skills needs to be learned through the context or through the curriculum. And 21st century skills, what we discussed, what we talked about. Now, obviously, we cannot incorporate and instill everything at one go. And that is why we say that curriculum designing is extremely important, because what needs to go where, how much it needs to go, which topic needs what activity or exercise is extremely important while we are designing the curriculum. Like I said, whether it is art integrated, whether it is project-based, whether it is interdisciplinary or cross-curricular. So somebody is asking me, how often should feedback be given? The more often, the better it is. Because feedback is something, and obviously if you have 20 children in your class, you can't be giving feedback to each and every child each and every day. So there could be times. So for example, you have done an essay writing or a composition writing, and there are 10 children out of 20 who need a genuine feedback on that composition writing. Focus on them. The rest can survive, let them survive for now. You are teaching a poem, for example, or a social sciences chapter, or a mathematical concept, right? So not every child will do well in everything, and not every child will fumble and stumble into everything, right? So what is going to happen is, when we are talking about feedback, we need to see that which child needs a focus where, and that is where we need to give a feedback. But the same repeated feedback will also become dull and boring and monotonous. So we need to identify the areas, and it could be constructive feedback. It could be just an appreciative feedback that, wow, today your composition was just amazing. Why don't you, go ahead with this writing style or with this kind of a writing skill? So it's not necessary that we're only focusing on the weaknesses or the negative aspect. We can also just compliment, remark. Recently, I've started giving smileys and stars to my children. A very common thing, extremely common thing. I'm not writing remarks, especially for my 8th graders. The past 2 weeks, I'm not writing remarks. I'm just drawing smileys for them. So I've told them, whoever gets by the end of the month maximum smiling smileys deserve a chocolate from me. And whoever does not, let's count the number of sad smileys or crying smileys and smiling smileys. And then we will compare and contrast. And who can convert their crying smileys into my smiling smileys? Those are the incentives that we need to work around and work upon, right? So the feedback should be given quite often. But like I said, all 100 children, if you're teaching, cannot be given feedback every day and every time. So you need to focus. And also that in trying to give feedback to everybody, make sure that your feedback is, or our feedback is then constructive, something that will benefit the child, something that will support the child in the learning outcome. So this is about curriculum design. Let's see how teaching and learning is going to be effective in the CBE process, right? So when we're talking about teaching and learning, CBE process or CBE framework talks about student-centered learning and teaching. Lesson planning based on learning objectives and learning outcomes. And there has to be a touch of or an element of peer assessment and self-assessment and teacher assessment, the facilitator assessment. So these 3 things are of primary importance when we're talking about teaching and learning. But more importantly, we're talking about student-centered learning and teaching. And we're talking about active teaching learning strategies and pedagogies in teaching and learning as a key feature and a key part of CBE. That is competency-based education and learning framework. Assessment. So when we're talking about assessment, another strong pillar of competency-based framework, continuous assessment apart from summative assessment is extremely important. Data-driven, that means we need to obviously maintain our records and data, and we need to bring in real-world contexts and connections. So however times frequent, ongoing, because frequent formative and diagnostic or diagnostic and synoptic assessments, they help a lot in building and bridging the learning gaps. So what we have set for a particular topic and what we want, the desired expected result from a particular topic or children, they don't match. There is a learning gap. To bridge that learning gap, to gauge the learning gap, to gauge the comprehension levels of the learners, it is important that we take or conduct frequent ongoing formative assessments. There could be of 2 marks, 3 marks, 5 marks. More than 10 marks is not a very good idea, but 5 marks, 6 marks, a writing skill, an MCQ, fill in the blank, true and false, in whichever way. Draw a sketch, draw a storyboard, in whichever way. Write down 10 bullet points based on what you've learned and let them do it. It becomes a formative assessment, and it becomes extremely important and a crucial part of assessing, gauging the children and building the learning gaps. Now, there are some principles for CBE, right? So let's have a quick look at those principles. So we need to have clear learning outcomes, right? So clear learning outcomes, like we said, objectives and outcomes have to be absolutely clear. So that we can bridge the learning gaps. right? Personalized learning. So individualized, personalized learning, formative assessments and authentic assessments, a flexible, conducive learning environment really plays an important role in the holistic growth and development of the child, right? And like I said, assessments and active teaching learning strategies always need to be followed by continuous, constructive, positive, helpful, and timely, regular feedback. Really important. So these are some of the principles or tenets for CBE. I'll give you, say, about 10-15 seconds to give it a quick look. Right? If there is anything, please feel free to use the chat box. Now, the 4 pillars that are in sync or in line with CBE, learning is anytime, anywhere. So we are all learners, even as educators, even as facilitators. What we are doing today is we're learning from one another. We are building on our own skills and competencies. We are developing our own selves. We are growing because we have a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is also extremely important in progress and success. Learning is authentic and connected. That means it is not just related to book and textbook. Padha, band kiya, exam diya, and it's done and dusted. No. It is an ongoing, ever-going process. Learning. And it has to be into a lot of connections, a lot of relations, a lot of text to self connection, text to text connection, and text to real world connection. Learning has to be owned by the children, the learners, meaning to say it has to be made accountable for the children. Children have to be made accountable for their own learning and for their own progress and for the entire process and their journey and the final outcome. And learning has to be supported by the entire community. It cannot be a one-man show and one army show. So I am a language teacher, for example, and quite often, and more often than not, have I heard that English is the prerogative only of the language teachers. Language teachers can only teach children English as a language, as enhance their skills in English as a language. I kind of beg to differ slightly. I am teaching English as a language, yes, but I'm also teaching English as a subject like maths, like sciences, like social sciences, or whichever subject, you may psychology, biology, chemistry. So yes, as much as English is a language, all of us need to be adept in that language. So English as a global language becomes all of our responsibility to be able to inculcate in our children, not just the responsibility of the languages department. But yes, language as a subject, as content is my responsibility to communicate to the children, right? So moving on. Looking at the pros and cons of CBE, right? So we've talked about a lot of advantages of CBE. It's flexible and for all types of students and whatever be their background or literacy levels. CBE is everybody's prerogative, everybody's right, if I may use the word so, right to access. Biases have to be removed and equity has to be achieved. That is the prime responsibility of a competency-based education or learning framework. Students are better prepared with the skills, obviously. When they have the skills, they are better prepared, right? And there is more acceptance, there is more inclusivity, there is more tolerance, there is more learning, peer assessment, group learning, communication, collaboration, use of technology if required, creative thinking and innovative thinking. All of that happens when students are made accountable. They take responsibility for their own education. But not everything is hunky-dory. Not everything is very good, right? There are own disadvantages and cons to the CBE, that is the competency-based framework. So how do you determine which competency for which class, which level which is extremely difficult. Like somebody said it also in the chat. Assessments, how to make assessments more effective, more creative, more meaningful. How to know the strategies, which strategies to put where, how to design a lesson plan, how to transact all of that when we have so much of syllabus to complete, exams and holidays and authorities and management and parents and children howling. And there are so many stakeholders. So how to make it more effective, how to make it more conducive, how to make it more enjoyable. All of that is a huge disadvantage. And then to make the children ready for real life world and real life job is also a huge, huge question. So a lot of research has to go into it. A lot of hard work has to go into it. A lot of belief has to go into it that yes, despite all of these barriers and disadvantages, despite all of these hiccups and obstacles, CBE is going to be effective. Yes, it is going to take place. And with a little bit of lesson planning and strategizing, a little bit of application-based activities, a little bit of creative-based activities, strategies and pedagogical methods and questioning technique and discussion and debate, conversations and writing skills and spoken skills, CBE can become a huge success in the near future, right? So when we are talking about CBE designing principles, let us understand the level of integration. So when we talk about aims and objectives, outcomes, how much to delve into the content, and whether there are transferable skills or not across academic subjects, cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary. So this is a checklist for you all. How much are you able to do? What is your level of, or our level of integration as educators and facilitators and teachers when we talk about that? Yes, I design a lesson plan which has clear objectives and clear outcomes. I design a curriculum which is relevant to context, which has the ability to encourage the children to make connections, connections to the self, connections to the world, connections to another text. But there are real life examples and real world connections. And there is scope for inclusivity and no bias. So you have to check. This is a checklist for us. What is our level of integration of these aspects into our curriculum design? Another is assessment. So when I design my assessment, does it promote equity and inclusivity? Is it accessible? Does it promote higher order skills? Is it real world relevance? Is it synoptic, diagnostic, or interdisciplinary in nature? Are my assessments reliable? What is the validity of my assessments? How authentic my assessments are? How reliable and authentic? So there is this checklist for us in terms of level of integration. Then we are talking about teaching and learning, which is strategies, active teaching learning strategies and higher order thinking skills and formative assessments and methods and feedback. So whether my strategies focus on the outcomes, whether they're interactive or they are just monotonous, like how I am doing right now, unfortunately so. Whether my strategies are activity-based, whether do they promote higher order thinking skills, and whether my activities and flipped classroom method or strategies and pedagogies are appropriate for formative assessments or not. So this is a quick checklist for all of us educators. So this I had prepared, but I know we cannot, but we can use the chat box for this. So I want you all to understand and then put it in the chat box. Possible outcomes of CBE. What according to you are possible outcomes of CBE? So you can put it in the chat box. Skill development. Yes. What else? Two possible outcomes, at least. skill development, comprehension, aim and objective, confidence boost, student-centric. So these are positive, probable outcomes. Better thinking, higher ordering. What are two challenges that you think you face in implementing CBE? Some of the challenges. So, yes, challenges, application, creation of knowledge. All students of the same level or different level. Time is such a huge challenge. Mixed group of learners, changes, times, completion of syllabus. Yes, time management, my God. Same sentiment. What a same sentiment everybody is echoing. Size of the class or group, syllabus completion, mindsets. Yes, mindset. To change the mindset is huge. So we need to have absolutely, we need to have, just 1 second. Royston has something on, is the screen visible? 1 second. I think I pressed some button.
Your screen was visible. Now it is not visible.
Now is it not visible? Yes, I think I actually pressed some button. 1 second. I will get back to where I was. Yes, I was here. Just give me a second. Right. Is it visible now?
Yes, it is.
Great. So I'm back to the same slide. So I've been talking about challenges. So differently able student, understanding each student, assessment, time, completion of syllabus, changing mindsets, levels of competencies. Amazing. So I earlier I used to think, when I wasn't aware of CBE framework, I used to think that, oh my God, am I the only one who is feeling this? Am I the only one who is struggling with time, who's struggling with syllabus completion? Because let me tell you, I primarily am also an educator, a teacher. I teaches from grade 7 to 12, right? So all of this that you're echoing is my sentiment also, or earlier was. Now I don't think I struggle with these sentiments though, but earlier these were my sentiments also, which I used to echo. How will I manage my syllabus? How will I manage 25 children in my class? How am I going to design my lesson plan? How am I going to incorporate strategies also, and this also and that also in a 40-minute lesson plan or a 40-minute class? Children come in late, they don't bring their books and copies, they don't complete their homework in time. My God, and the list is endless. And on to top it all, parents and authorities and management, all of that is so much on the head that it takes away a lot of our energy. It gives so much of anxiety to us as educators and teachers. Yet we have to be calm, we have to be composed, we have to be under control of our emotions, in control of our emotions, to be able to deliver, to be able to transact, right? And that is our skill. That is where our competency lies, right? So my next question is, what is the way forward? How do we resolve all of this? There is so much of a challenge, there is so much of a hassle, there is so much of a problem in life, and how do we intend to resolve all of this? Any suggestions? Any solutions, anyone? So to resolve all of this. So before I organize better, planning, that is why lesson planning comes into picture. Yes, collaboration. Yes, absolutely. Collaboration and working in a team. You know what? Sharing ideas. Sharing best practices is something that I find really useful. Best practices with your own colleagues, with your own folks, and with your own mates. So sometimes what happens is, we do something in a class and we keep it to ourselves. Now, there are two ways of two reasons of keeping it to ourselves. One, either we are conscious whether it went off well or not, or we are a little, nahi yaar, ye to mera hai, let me not. This is mine, so let me not. So based on that, but what I have experienced that yes, scaffolding helps a lot. Planning, effective planning is the key to every problem, is a key solution. It's a master key to every solution. So I have again experienced from my own experiences, the days that I go well planned, the weekend that I spend in planning for the next week. So for example, today is Saturday, I might take a little off today, but tomorrow I will sit down definitely with all my lesson plans, all my weekly lesson plans, and I will glance through it. If something is already designed and made, well and good. If not, I'm going to create comprehensive weekly lesson plans for each of my class with strategies and activities and pedagogies and questions, homework, worksheets, formative if there is required any. Also to mark that this is the day I'm going to collect the copies and this is when I'm going to return with so much of work done and not done and everything. So preparation and planning are the master key to confidence and success, right? Resources, keep yourself updated and abreast with the latest trends and changing and everything. Resources are extremely important. We need to keep ourselves abreast. Otherwise, children have Google also. They don't need us. They can get anything that they want from internet and online. But they need us because we provide them with human connect. We provide them with the kind of feedback individually that they require. We provide them with personalized attention and individualized attention. So how much ever technology might boom up, we will never be replaced. Teachers and parents are irreplaceable, cannot be substituted with, apart from one odd substitution due to absenteeism here and there. But apart from that, we cannot be replaced. Absolutely not, right? So great responses. So what we need to do is the solution that we've come up with. So what we need to do is we need to align like I said, we need to align a curriculum to our lesson planning, to our transaction, and to the assessment. And this entire web and circle is going to be an effective circle of CBE. How CBE functions is on curriculum design. CBE functions on transaction of the curriculum, the content and the topic, assessment, feedback. So when all of this has happened, a full circle, CBE is in total control and in total completion. Addressing issues around accessibility, around alignment, practical knowledge, real world skills, coverage and competencies is extremely important. Connections and real life examples, and higher order thinking skills, because CBE focuses, I'm sure we will talk about, if we've heard of, and I'm sure all of us must have heard of Bloom's taxonomy. So there is a revised Bloom's taxonomy, which talks about lower order thinking skills, that is, recap, recall, and then comprehension and understanding, and then application and synthesis. And then on top of it, higher order thinking skills is creation, composition. So all of this comes under Bloom's taxonomy. So when we're talking about practical knowledge and real world skills, when we're talking about giving more weightage to higher order thinking skills of creativity and composition, and when we are ensuring valid, authentic assessment, then the tenets of CBE, that is competency-based framework and education, comes to an absolute full circle. Yes, school activities also clash with our plans, and that is why flexible planning. If we become rigid, that nay, today this is what it is, and come what may, hail or storm or thunder or lightning, this is it. If we become stubborn and rigid, then CBE loses its purpose. So competency-based framework talks about flexible designing, flexible lesson plans, flexible work environment, conducive, positive learning, growth environment. That is what. So we need to upgrade ourselves. We need to discuss with the colleagues. We need to accept feedback ourselves from our peers and higher authorities to be able to give constructive, positive, timely feedback to our learners, right? So all of this is a huge, huge part of CEB. Plan B, Plan C, Plan F, Plan Z, all of up to you, because you are the master of your class. You are the one who knows how your class is, how your children are, and you are the ones who need to take the class forward. So you are the ones who know how to design the classroom, the curriculum, the discipline, the demeanor, the decorum, the management, the student, their different learning abilities, and what is going to work best for your class. In fact, suppose you're teaching grade 9A and 9B. So both are of the same grades, but children will be different. Their learning styles will be different. Their learning abilities will be different, right? So even though you are teaching the same two classes, two sections of the same levels, yet their styles, their comprehension skills, their outcomes might differ from one or the other. Different students in the same class will react and respond differently. And that is the whole purpose of CBE, the competency-based framework. The whole purpose of talking about skills and competencies is to understand each and every child, as a human being, and not as a robot or a machine. To understand the different styles of learning, the different levels of learning, and integrating them into our own lesson plans and curriculum design. To be able to understand different children's perspectives and psychology and psyche and mindsets, and then to assess them, gauge them, and give them feedback. All of this is a part of CBE, competency-based education and framework. So I will keep the last 10 minutes for a Q&A session, but before that, let's have a quick reflection, because like I said, designing, strategizing, transacting, assessing, feedbacking, and then reflecting is an entire whole process of competency-based teaching and learning, competency-based skills, framework, and curriculum. So what made you curious today? Quick reflection. Quick reflection of what made you curious today. Anything that made you curious today? Am I already doing in my classroom? All right. What else? Understanding CBE entirety topic that made you curious today. Amazing, great. So I hope your curiosity has been answered. Execution, more about CBE, how to make lesson plans more interesting. So we will talk about lesson plan when we are talking about curriculum designing and framework, because creating a lesson plan is in itself a huge discussion and topic, right? Bloom's taxonomy, yes, Bloom's taxonomy. Flexibility of planning, we have to be flexible, we cannot be rigid, yes. Curriculum designing, so how to design a curriculum with activities and strategies and pedagogies and teacher interaction and intervention and student response. All of that is a part of curriculum designing. Yes, peer and self-assessment is a great strategy to enhance learning, conducive learning, and to removing biases in the class and among the learners, right? Amazing. The urgency to change our attitude and approach. We have to have a growth mindset. Absolutely. Absolutely. Implementation assessment, flexible planning and sharing. I'm curious to know how CB is actually implemented in the class. So that will come, that question will be answered when we are doing lesson planning, when we are doing assessments, and when we are doing active teaching learning strategies. When we are doing active teaching learning strategies, all of these questions of implementation, execution are going to be answered. Absolutely. 3 takeaways from the session. So whatever past 1.5 hours I've been talking about, 2 to 3 major takeaways from that. Importance of giving Constructive feedback, yes. Proper lesson planning, yes, is extremely important. Creating interest among the students and learners is extremely important. Validity of assessment. Every child is different and no child should be left behind. Frequent, consistent assessments and feedback, yes. With real world application, real world practical knowledge, yes. Proper planning, yes. Reflection is extremely important. What I am doing right now is reflecting. Through your responses, I'm reflecting. I'm constantly trying to understand who's understood what and what not, right? Flexibility, yes. Frequent feedback to the child, yes. Keeping the classroom learner-centric is extremely important. Once in a while, of course, yes, we become, so that we are not out of fashion and out of context, we also have to be a part of it. But yes, learners, they are our biggest and most important stakeholders. Growth mindset is absolutely, even we as learners and teachers, we are constantly learning, constantly. Royston, I need just 1 second. I need to put my laptop on charging, otherwise it will crash off any moment. Yes, I'm back. Technology. Yes, understanding the proper mindset of children is extremely important. Effective lesson planning and strategizing is the key to a successful, if not successful, then a satisfactory transaction in the class, right? Now let's come to the last bit of it and a very important part, questions. Keep rolling in the chat box. I'm reading constantly, but questions, let's take questions now. Sharing with colleagues is very important, yes. Needless to say that. So let's have your questions now. My eyes are all on chat box. Slow learner. So ma'am, what is your question about slow learner? So what about slow? So slow learners actually, they cannot learn effectively in an all classroom scenario. Slow learners need to be given one-to-one and personalized attention, individual attention. Otherwise, it is embarrassing for them. We cannot focus on them all the time, because then the other learners will be left behind, and we cannot neglect them also because they're equally important. So the only strategy to slow learners is that we need to give them a little extra time, a little personalized touch, a little individualized attention. Please keep rolling with the questions. Unattentive. That is where our active teaching learning strategies, a group work, these learners most importantly need to be given some or the other task that creates their interest. Writing task, reading task, any sort of task that creates interest among them. First generation learners, how to manage 40-minute class for different type of learners for same topic. That is where classroom designing, the curriculum designing and lesson planning comes into effect. Lesson planning is all about 40-45 minutes of classroom with intentions, objectives and goals, strategies, activities, and student discussion and teacher intervention. That is all the lesson planning all about. I do agree with CBE, but we have to sacrifice more things because of the syllabus. Yes, syllabus completion is such a challenge, such a huge task, needless. I mean, I wouldn't deny that. But like I said, all of it will be overcome with effective lesson plan. Effective lesson plan, when so there will be some topics which will require this much of attention on something, and there will be some topic which will require this much of attention on something. So all of that will be overcome and overruled with effective lesson planning. Then, because when you have put it into a lesson plan, then it becomes easy. It becomes really easy for you to understand where to do what and how much, where to stop. Is it possible to identify the students' mentality by activity? Yes. Activities is a great source of identifying differently abled learners, because when you're on your run and rounds and children are involved in activities, you are only gauging and assessing them, not formally, but you're observing them. And our observation is a huge tool that will help us in giving effective feedback to the children. Hyperactive children can be tackled with giving a lot of responsibilities and sense of accountability. Make them peer tutors. Best way of dealing with intelligent children or hyperactive children is to give them responsibility. Give them two buddies, give them two peers to look after. Their entire energy, if not entire, but most of the energy will be channelized into peer mentoring, peer assessment, peer tutoring, and looking after their buddies. So make them buddies, make them mentors. That is the best way. That is what I do in my classes. I make hyperactive children buddy peers and pair them up with peers. All right, there was a question. What strategy do we have to use for those who are slow writers? So slow writers have to be given time-bound activities, if not during the classroom transaction, but you have to give them as tasks that this is what they have to complete in this much time. And that is how they can increase their speed and time themselves. Give them notes to copy, doesn't matter, not an issue. Because even if they're copying, they're writing something is going into their heads, right? So not all the time will they succeed, but time-bound activities and restricted activities will help them. Naughty children, again, sense of responsibility, make them buddies, mentors, give them activities, give them responsibility, make them accountable for something or the other. Make them run, make them talk, make them write as much as you can. How can a special learner be identified? Very easily. Special learners can also be extremely easily identified through their writing skills, through their speaking skills, through their reading skills, because every special learner is different in their learning ability. Some special learner could read but cannot write properly. Some special learner could write very well but not with oral communication. Some special learners work very well, or differently abled children work very well in teams and not as individuals, and vice versa and likewise. So through a lot of group activities and individual activities, even special learners, hyperactive children, intelligent children, slow learners, all of them can be identified through skill-based activities, project-based, art-integrated. So suppose, I have given up, I kind of give word walls to my children to draw and make. Now, sometimes when I don't want to give a heavy homework to the children, I tell them read this chapter and make a nice creative word wall of 15 words and their meanings, right? So the ones who are good with art and drawing, they sometimes come up with such beautiful designs of word wall, and they write the words and meanings into it. Some will just scribble, and some will just copy it down and write, and some will actually look up the dictionary. So the same activity, but different strategies. So different. So same activity, but perceived differently by different students. They are more keen to remove teachers' mistake. How to handle remove teachers' mistake? You mean to say point out teachers' mistakes? Yes, because children are intelligent. They are smart, right? They're very keen on identifying and pointing out at teachers' mistakes. So the best way is to preserve your dignity and also not to let the child down. If there is a mistake, if there is something, honesty. Honesty leads to integrity. So admitting it, very well and good. But if there is no mistake and the child is still insistent, then the child definitely needs to be spoken to separately. So these are all children's psychology. These are all child's mentality and classroom management that needs to be tackled with. Last question. Do you think special learners should be there in same school? Yes, why not? Why can't special learners be there that is what we're talking about, inclusive education. What is inclusive education then? We are talking about removing gender biases. We're talking about removing, biases pertaining to differently abled children. So what is the harm in having differently abled children in the same classroom, same school? That will give them a sense of normality, normalcy, and also acceptance, belonging, and inclusivity. Restless children, I just said, make them accountable, make them buddies, make them mentors, make them peers, peer tutors. Lesson plan, we will talk about when we are doing lesson planning and active teaching learning strategies, right? I think Royston and Sunil sir and Sheila ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Pooja, for a very impressive and immersive session. I'm sure the teachers have had a lot of takeaways from today's session. They have disabled my video, so I'm afraid you can't see me, but I'm sure the teachers have really been very impressed with what you had to say to them. Ma'am, it seems there are a lot of
I
queries
know.
on lesson plans. Perhaps we
Yes,
could
yes.
have one more session on lesson plans with you. In the
Absolutely.
meanwhile, if teachers have any more questions, you could mail them to us and we'll share them with Dr. Pooja. And I'm sure she'll get back with the answers for all of you.
Absolutely. I know lesson planning is
So
a
on that
huge
note,
thing.
we'll call it a day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
Yeah.
you for bearing with me for about 2 hours.
So,
almost.
ma'am, we'll get back to ABEA and let's see how
Yes.
we can have a session on lesson plans. Bye-bye for
Absolutely.
now.
Bye.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.